The clock on Noah Bennett's nightstand glowed 4:47 a.m., mocking him with each passing minute. He sat propped against the headboard of his king-sized bed, tablet in hand, reviewing quarterly reports that blurred together into meaningless numbers. Outside his downtown Seattle apartment, the city was just beginning to stir, but Noah had never stopped moving. 4 years. 1,460 nights of staring at ceilings, counting breaths, trying every remedy from meditation apps to prescription sleeping pills. Nothing worked. The doctors had run their tests, declared him physically healthy, and suggested therapy with barely concealed impatience. But Noah knew the problem wasn't in his body, it was in his soul. At 35, Noah Bennett had everything society told him should make him happy. As CEO of Bennett Pharmaceuticals, a company he'd built from the ground up, he was worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. His penthouse apartment overlooked Elliott Bay, filled with furniture that cost more than most people's cars. He drove a Tesla, wore custom suits, and had a personal assistant who managed every detail of his meticulously controlled life, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt truly alive. Noah set aside the tablet and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The pre-dawn sky was turning from black to deep purple, streaks of orange just beginning to paint the horizon. Beautiful. Empty. Like everything else in his life, his reflection stared back at him from the glass, tall, lean, with dark hair that probably needed cutting and shadows under his green eyes that no amount of expensive skincare could erase. Women found him attractive, he saw it in their glances at business meetings, at charity galas, at the rare social events he forced himself to attend. But attraction meant nothing when you couldn't let anyone close enough to touch the truth of who you were. The truth was simple and humiliating. Noah Bennett was a 35-year-old virgin who'd never had a real relationship with anyone. Not because he lacked opportunity. Not because of religious conviction. But because intimacy required something he'd never learned to give, trust. His childhood had been a masterclass in emotional isolation. His father, a ruthless corporate attorney, had viewed affection as weakness and emotion as liability. His mother had died when Noah was 8, and his father had responded by sending him to boarding schools where academic excellence was rewarded and vulnerability was punished. By the time Noah was a teenager, he'd learned to bury everything that made him human beneath layers of achievement and control. The strategy had worked brilliantly for his career. Less so for his life. The insomnia had started shortly after his company went public, right after he'd reached the pinnacle of success he'd been chasing his entire life. He'd expected satisfaction, fulfillment, some sense of having arrived. Instead, he'd been hit with crushing awareness of how utterly alone he was. 4 years of sleepless nights, watching his reflection age in real time, feeling his grip on reality slowly fray at the edges. Noah had tried everything. He'd hired trainers, nutritionists, sleep specialists. He'd invested in the most advanced sleep technology money could buy. He'd even attempted dating, though those disasters had only reinforced why he avoided intimacy in the first place. Women expected things from him: confidence, experience, the ability to navigate physical connection with ease. He had none of those things, and the few times he'd tried to explain, the rejection had been swift and absolute. So he'd stopped trying. Stopped everything except work, until last week, when his assistant had found him passed out at his desk at 3 p.m., having finally collapsed after 72 hours awake. The company doctor had been called, tests had been run, and Noah had seen the concern in everyone's eyes. He was becoming a liability to his own company. That night, alone in his apartment, Noah had done something he'd never done before. He'd admitted he needed help, real help, not the kind doctors could prescribe. He'd found the website almost by accident, a legitimate companion service that provided exactly what it advertised: professional company for people who needed connection without the complications of traditional relationships. The site was discreet, carefully regulated, and surprisingly thoughtful in its approach. Noah had spent 3 hours reading profiles before one caught his attention: Sage Rivers. 29 years old. Former grief counselor. The profile described her as intuitive, patient, and experienced with clients seeking emotional connection rather than purely physical services. Her photo showed a woman with long auburn hair, warm hazel eyes, and a gentle smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. Her bio mentioned that she specialized in helping people who struggled with vulnerability, who needed someone to simply be present without judgment or expectation. Noah had read it 5 times before filling out the request form. He'd been honest in a way that terrified him, explaining his situation without embellishment, the insomnia, the isolation, the fact that he'd never been intimate with anyone and wasn't even sure what he wanted from this encounter. The agency's response had come within hours. Sage was available. She'd read his request and was willing to meet him. They could arrange something for tonight if he agreed to their terms. Noah had agreed to everything, provided payment information, and then spent the entire day in a state of anxiety that made business meetings impossible to focus on. Now, as dawn broke over Seattle, he had exactly 12 hours until Sage Rivers arrived at his door. 12 hours to decide if he was really going to go through with this. 12 hours to prepare for something he'd avoided his entire adult life. Noah pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window and closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him like an undertow. He was so tired. So incredibly, bone-deep tired. Maybe tonight, for the first time in 4 years, he'd finally be able to rest. At exactly 8 p.m., the intercom buzzed. Noah's heart lurched so violently he thought he might actually be having a heart attack. He pressed the button with a hand that trembled slightly. Yes? Mr. Bennett? It's Sage Rivers. Her voice was warmer than he'd expected, without the practiced sultriness he'd been dreading. Noah buzzed her up, then spent the next 30 seconds checking his reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing his hair, adjusting his shirt, a casual button-down he'd changed into and out of 3 times, and generally looking like someone on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The private elevator opened directly into his apartment. When the doors slid apart, Noah's breath caught. Sage Rivers looked nothing like her photo and exactly like it at the same time. She was shorter than he'd imagined, maybe 5'5", with that auburn hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She wore simple black jeans and a soft gray sweater that looked comfortable rather than seductive. She carried a small canvas bag over one shoulder and smiled at him with genuine warmth. Noah? Yes. Please, come in. He stepped back, suddenly aware of how sterile his apartment must seem. Everything was too clean, too perfect, too obviously the home of someone who didn't actually live in it. Sage stepped inside, her eyes taking in the space with quiet observation rather than judgment. She didn't comment on the view or the expensive furnishings. She simply turned to face him with patient calm. "Thank you for being so honest in your message," she said. "It helps me understand what you actually need." Noah had prepared several responses to various scenarios. None of them seemed adequate now. "I'm not sure I know what I need," he admitted. "That's okay. We'll figure it out together." Sage set her bag down by the door and moved further into the living room with an ease that surprised him. She didn't act like someone who'd been hired. She acted like someone who'd been invited. "Can I get you something to drink?" Noah asked, defaulting to the hospitality he'd observed but rarely practiced. "Water would be great, thank you." He escaped to the kitchen, grateful for something to do. As he filled 2 glasses, he watched Sage from the corner of his eye. She'd moved to the windows, looking out at the city lights with what seemed like genuine interest. "Your message mentioned insomnia," Sage said when he handed her the glass. "How long has it been since you slept through the night?" The directness startled him. 4 years. Maybe longer, but it became severe 4 years ago. That must be exhausting. Something in Noah's chest tightened. No one had simply acknowledged the exhaustion before. They'd offered solutions, suggestions, judgments, but no one had just recognized how tired he was. "It is," he said quietly. "Can we sit?" Sage gestured toward the large sectional sofa. "Standing feels too formal." They sat at opposite ends, leaving several feet between them. The distance felt safer. "You also mentioned you've never been intimate with anyone," Sage said without preamble. "Can I ask why you decided to reach out now?" Noah had expected this question but still struggled with the answer. I thought maybe if I experienced what I've been avoiding, something might shift. The insomnia, the isolation, maybe it's all connected. And what have you been avoiding exactly? Physical intimacy or emotional intimacy? The question cut deeper than he'd anticipated. I don't know the difference. Sage's expression softened. That's honest. Most people pretend they do. They talked for the next hour about everything and nothing. Sage asked about his company, and Noah found himself explaining his work with genuine enthusiasm for the first time in months. She told him about her transition from grief counseling to companion services, the judgment she'd faced, and why she believed this work was more honest than most professions. People think intimacy is just physical, Sage said at one point. But I've sat with people who needed to be held while they cried more than they needed anything else. The body is easy. It's the heart that most people can't access. Is that what you think I need? To access my heart? Sage smiled. I think you need to remember you have one. As the conversation deepened, Noah felt something unfamiliar, actual ease in another person's presence. Sage didn't try to fix him or seduce him. She simply existed alongside him without demand or expectation. Around 10 p.m., Sage stood and stretched. Can I ask you something that might sound strange? Yes. Would you mind if we just lay down together? Not for anything physical, just to rest. Sometimes our bodies need permission to relax, and they respond better when we're not alone. Noah's immediate instinct was to refuse. The vulnerability of lying beside another person felt overwhelming. But exhaustion won over fear. Okay. They moved to his bedroom. Sage entered without hesitation, without commenting on the massive bed that dominated the space. Do you have a side you prefer? No. I move around too much. Nothing feels right. Then I'll take the left. She removed her shoes and lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed. Noah mirrored her actions on the right side. They lay on their backs, several feet apart, staring at the ceiling in the dim light filtering through the windows. This feels absurd, Noah said. Most meaningful things do at first. Silence settled over them. Not uncomfortable, just present. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, two strangers lay in the dark, connected by transaction and honest need. Can I tell you something? Sage's voice came softly. I almost canceled tonight. I read your message and thought you needed more than I could offer. But something about your honesty made me want to show up. Why do you do this work? Noah asked. After my divorce, I felt invisible. Like I'd spent years being what someone else needed and forgotten how to be myself. This work lets me choose. Every client is a choice. Every boundary is mine. That power matters. They talked through the darkness about childhood, family, the messages they'd received about love and worth. Noah found himself sharing memories he'd buried for decades. Around midnight, something strange happened. Noah's eyelids grew heavy. The constant buzz of anxiety that usually kept him wired began to fade. He turned his head slightly and saw Sage's profile in the dim light, her breathing slow and steady. Sage, he whispered. Thank you for being here. She reached across the space between them and found his hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, warm, real, anchoring. Sleep, Noah. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in 4 years, Noah Bennett closed his eyes and drifted into actual, peaceful sleep. Noah woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom windows and the disorienting realization that he felt rested. Actually rested. He turned his head and found Sage already awake, sitting up against the headboard with her phone, scrolling through something with a small smile on her face. What time is it? His voice came out rough with sleep, a sound he'd almost forgotten. Almost 9. Sage looked at him with obvious satisfaction. You slept for 8 hours straight. That's impossible. Check your watch. Noah looked at his fitness tracker, which confirmed it. 8 hours and 12 minutes of continuous sleep. The longest stretch he'd had in 4 years. He stared at the numbers, something uncomfortable swelling in his chest. "Hey," Sage's voice was gentle. "It's okay. I don't understand. How, sometimes our bodies just need permission to let go. And sometimes that permission comes from not being alone." She shifted to face him better. "How do you feel?" Noah took inventory. His head felt clearer. The constant fog of exhaustion had lifted slightly. But more than that, he felt something he couldn't quite name, a sense of possibility he'd forgotten existed. "Different," he said finally. "I feel different." Sage smiled. "Good different or scary different?" "Both." They had breakfast together, coffee and toast, simple and domestic in a way Noah's life never was. Sage moved around his kitchen with easy confidence, finding mugs and plates without asking where anything was kept. They sat at the counter and talked about nothing important, and Noah found himself laughing for the first time in weeks. When Sage prepared to leave around 10, Noah felt panic rising in his throat. "Can you come back?" The words tumbled out before he could stop them. "I know that's not how this works, but I slept, Sage. I actually slept, and I can't go back to how it was before." Sage studied his face carefully. "I can come back. But we should establish some clear boundaries. This isn't a traditional relationship, Noah. It can't be." "I understand. Do you? Because what happened last night was special, but it was also my job. I need you to remember that." The word stung, but Noah nodded. "Thursday nights? Same time?" Thursday nights, Sage agreed. That became their routine. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., Sage would arrive. They'd cook dinner together, Sage teaching Noah recipes he'd never bothered to learn, Noah fumbling with ingredients and laughing at his own incompetence. They'd talk for hours, sharing pieces of their lives like puzzle pieces slowly forming a picture, and then they'd sleep. Just sleep, curled together in Noah's massive bed, Sage's presence somehow the only thing that could quiet his racing mind enough to rest. Over the following weeks, Noah began to change. He slept better on the nights Sage wasn't there. He smiled more at work. His assistant commented that he seemed lighter somehow. His business partner, Marcus, noticed too. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," Marcus said during a morning meeting. "You look like an actual human being for the first time in years." But it wasn't just the sleep. It was Sage herself, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she listened without trying to fix him, the way she challenged him when he retreated behind his walls. She made him want to be brave. By the 6th week, Noah realized with stunning clarity that he was falling in love with her. They were cooking pasta together, Sage's attempt to teach him how to make carbonara from scratch, when he nearly said it out loud. She was standing at the stove, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing one of his old t-shirts because she'd spilled sauce on her own. She was gesturing with a wooden spoon, explaining the importance of timing when adding eggs, and Noah felt his heart crack open. "You're staring," Sage said without looking at him. "Sorry." She turned then, something flickering in her hazel eyes. "Noah, I know. Boundaries. This is your job. I remember." But Sage didn't look away. Instead, she set down the spoon and stepped closer. "Is it becoming more than that for you?" Noah could have lied. Should have lied. Instead, he chose honesty. "Yes. Me too," she whispered. The confession hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. They'd been so careful to keep their physical connection chaste, holding hands, cuddling while they slept, occasional hugs goodbye. But now, standing in his kitchen with tomato sauce simmering on the stove, something shifted. Sage reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "This is complicated. I know. We should probably stop. Before it gets more complicated." "Probably." Neither of them moved. The space between them felt electric, charged with months of restrained wanting. Noah's heart hammered as Sage rose on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. "Tell me to stop," she murmured. "I can't." Sage kissed him then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as Noah responded. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound that sent heat racing through him. The kiss was everything he'd imagined and nothing like he'd expected, urgent and gentle, desperate and careful all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage rested her forehead against his. "We can't go back from this," she said. "I don't want to go back." They turned off the stove. Dinner could wait. Everything could wait. For the first time in his life, Noah Bennett was choosing connection over control. And it felt like finally learning to breathe. The next morning, Noah woke wrapped around Sage in a tangle of limbs and sheets, his face buried in her hair. They'd crossed every line the night before, slowly, carefully, with a tenderness that had made Noah's chest ache. Sage had guided him through his inexperience with patient grace, and Noah had discovered that intimacy wasn't the terrifying loss of control he'd always feared. It was connection. It was trust. It was everything he'd been missing. Sage stirred against him, turning in his arms to face him. Her hair was messy, her face free of makeup, and she'd never looked more beautiful. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." They lay there in the early morning light, neither speaking, just existing in the fragile bubble they'd created. But Noah knew bubbles didn't last. Reality always intruded. It happened later that afternoon. Noah was in his home office, attempting to focus on a board meeting presentation, when Marcus called. "We need to talk," his business partner said without preamble. "My office. Now." The drive to Bennett Pharmaceuticals headquarters took 20 minutes. Marcus was waiting in his office, arms crossed, expression grave. "Sit down, Noah. What's going on? I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Marcus leaned against his desk. "Are you involved with a professional companion?" Noah's blood went cold. "How did you, Jesus Christ, Noah?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Thompson from the board saw you with her at that restaurant last month. He had her investigated. Do you have any idea what this looks like? We're not doing anything illegal, that's not the point. You're the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. We're 3 months from launching a new drug that could change the industry. The board is already nervous about the FDA approval process. And now they're worried about scandal." Marcus's voice rose. "They're saying it's a judgment issue. That you're distracted. That this relationship, it's not a relationship," Noah interrupted, the words tasting like ash. "Or it wasn't supposed to be. But it is now." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Noah, I can see you care about this woman. And honestly, you've been better these past few months than I've seen you in years. But the board won't care about that. They care about optics and liability. So what are they asking? They want you to end it. Publicly distance yourself. Maybe even issue a statement about focusing on the company." Noah stood abruptly. "They want me to pretend she doesn't exist. They want to protect the company. And your reputation. A CEO paying for companionship, it doesn't matter how legitimate the service is. People will make assumptions. Sage isn't just," Noah stopped, trying to find words that could explain what she'd become to him. "She helped me when no one else could. She saw me when I'd forgotten how to be seen. I'm not ending things because the board is worried about image. Then you might be ending your career instead." The words hung heavy in the air. Noah walked to Marcus's office window, looking out at the city below. Everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed for, was on the line. The logical choice was obvious. Protect the company. End things with Sage. Return to the controlled, isolated existence that had served him so well professionally, but when he closed his eyes, he saw Sage's face. Felt her hand in his. Remembered what it felt like to finally not be alone. I need to talk to her, Noah said finally. He drove back to his apartment too fast, his mind racing. Sage wasn't supposed to be there until Thursday, but he needed to see her. He called her number, the personal one she'd given him weeks ago, breaking her own professional boundaries. Noah? What's wrong? Can you come over? Please. I need to see you. She arrived within the hour, concern etched across her face. Noah met her at the elevator, and the moment he saw her, something in him cracked open. They know, he said. My board knows about us. They want me to end things. They're saying it's a scandal waiting to happen. Sage went pale. I should have been more careful. I knew better than to be seen with you in public. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? Noah, I'm literally a professional companion. Of course this was going to be a problem for you eventually. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe we should end this. Before it destroys everything you've built. No. Noah, I love you. The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. I'm in love with you, Sage. I don't care what the board thinks or what anyone thinks. These past few months with you have been the first time I've felt actually alive in years. I'm not giving that up. Tears spilled down Sage's cheeks. You can't mean that. I do. I've spent my entire life choosing control over connection, choosing success over happiness. I'm done with that. I'm choosing you. But your company can survive without me as CEO. Marcus is brilliant. He can take over. Noah crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. You asked me once what I was avoiding, physical intimacy or emotional intimacy. I was avoiding both because I was terrified. But you taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. You taught me how to trust. How to feel. How to be human. I'm falling for you too, Sage whispered. I've been falling for weeks, and I kept telling myself it was just the job, just the arrangement. But it's not. You're not. Noah kissed her then, tasting salt from her tears, feeling her hands clutch at his shirt. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her crying. What are we going to do? She asked. We're going to figure it out together. And I'm going to tell the board that they can have my resignation if they can't handle this. Noah's voice was steady, certain. I've spent my whole life building walls. I'm ready to tear them down. For the first time since he was a child, Noah Bennett chose his heart over his head. And it felt like freedom. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Noah spent the weekend with Sage, talking through every scenario, every possible outcome. She offered repeatedly to step back, to disappear from his life to protect his career. Each time, Noah refused. I've been sleepwalking through my life for years, he told her Saturday night as they lay tangled together in his bed. You woke me up. I'm not going back to sleep. Monday arrived too quickly. Noah dressed in his best suit, armor for the battle ahead. Sage kissed him goodbye at the door, her eyes worried. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out, she promised. I know. The Bennett Pharmaceuticals boardroom was on the 35th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of downtown Seattle. 12 board members sat around the massive conference table, their expressions ranging from concerned to hostile. Marcus sat at the far end, looking tired. Thank you all for coming, Noah began, standing at the head of the table. I know you're here to discuss my personal life and how it affects this company. Before you say anything, I have something I need to tell you. He took a breath, steadying himself. 3 months ago, I was barely functioning. I hadn't slept properly in 4 years. I was so isolated that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a genuine human connection. This company was everything to me, but I was destroying myself maintaining it. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Then I met someone who helped me remember how to be human. Yes, I initially hired her through a professional companion service. But what developed between us became real, more real than any relationship I've ever had. She didn't want my money or my status. She wanted me to sleep through the night. To smile. To remember that I'm a person, not just a CEO. Noah, one of the board members began. Let me finish. I understand your concerns about optics and scandal. I understand that my relationship with Sage Rivers might not fit the image you want for this company's leadership. So I'm offering you a choice. The room went silent. I will step down as CEO effective immediately. Marcus Chen is more than capable of taking over, he's been running half the company anyway. I'll stay on as an advisor and major shareholder, but I'm removing myself from the public face of Bennett Pharmaceuticals. You're resigning? Marcus looked stunned. I'm choosing a life over a title. I've spent 35 years sacrificing everything for success, and I'm done. Success means nothing if I'm too exhausted and isolated to enjoy it. This is incredibly rash. It's incredibly overdue, Noah interrupted. I built this company because I thought achievement would fill the emptiness inside me. It didn't. All it did was give me a bigger, fancier cage to be lonely in. He looked around the table at faces he'd known for years, people he'd worked beside but never truly connected with. Sage gave me something none of you could, she gave me my life back. And I'm not giving her up because you're worried about what people might think. So either accept my resignation, or accept my relationship. Those are your options. The board members exchanged glances. Finally, Patricia Winters, the oldest member, spoke up. Noah, no one here wants to lose you. You built this company from nothing. But we do need to protect it. Then let me protect it by stepping aside. Marcus can handle the FDA approval process. He can handle the product launch. He doesn't need me hovering over his shoulder. Noah's voice softened. And I need to learn how to be Noah Bennett the person, not just Noah Bennett the CEO. The vote took less than 10 minutes. Marcus was appointed interim CEO, with a plan to make it permanent after a transition period. Noah would maintain his seat on the board and his significant stake in the company, but he was free from the daily grind of running it. When Noah left the building for the last time as CEO, he felt lighter than he had in years. He called Sage from his car. How did it go? She asked immediately. I'm unemployed. Noah. And I've never been happier. He was smiling as he drove, the Seattle skyline gleaming in his rearview mirror. Come over. I want to cook you dinner. You don't know how to cook. Then I'll learn. I have time now. That evening, they burned pasta together in Noah's kitchen, laughing at the smoke alarm that went off twice. They ordered pizza instead and ate it on the balcony, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. Do you regret it? Sage asked quietly. Giving up everything for this? Noah pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. I didn't give up everything. I gave up the things that were killing me. There's a difference. What will you do now? I don't know. Sleep in, probably. For the first time in my adult life. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Maybe travel. Learn to cook properly. Spend time with you without constantly checking my phone. That sounds boring. It sounds perfect. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the city lights began to glow. Noah felt Sage's breathing slow and steady against him, felt his own exhaustion, the good kind, from a full day rather than insomnia, beginning to pull at him. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For showing up that first night. For being patient with me. For teaching me that vulnerability isn't the same as weakness. Sage turned to look up at him, her hazel eyes reflecting the city lights. "Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me. For choosing this. Always," Noah promised. "I'll always choose this. Choose us." Later, as they lay in bed together, Noah felt sleep beginning to claim him, natural, peaceful sleep that came from contentment rather than exhaustion. Sage was curled against him, her breathing deep and even, and Noah realized something profound. For 4 years, he'd been chasing sleep as if it were the solution to his problems. But sleep was just a symptom. What he'd really needed was connection. Purpose beyond achievement. Someone to be human with. He'd found all of that in a woman he'd hired to help him sleep. And in the process, he'd finally learned how to live. As Noah drifted off, wrapped around the person who'd changed everything, he smiled into the darkness. Tomorrow he'd wake up to a life with no board meetings, no impossible schedules, no pressure to be anyone except himself. Tomorrow he'd wake up next to Sage, and they'd figure out this messy, complicated, beautiful thing called love together. For the first time in his adult life, Noah Bennett was looking forward to tomorrow. And every tomorrow after that.